India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has told the United Nations General Assembly that unviable projects raise debt levels and any connectivity that clouds sovereignty and territorial integrity acquires strategic connotation, especially when it is not a shared endeavor. Alluding to China's Belt and Road Initiative, Xi Jinping's signature project aimed at boosting China's economic and political influence. The statement was made in a veiled reference to China. Now here's a lowdown on Chinese debt trap diplomacy. According to World Bank data, Pakistan has a $27.4 billion external debt to China. Angola has a $22 billion external debt to China. Ethiopia owes $7.4 billion debt to China. Kenya has $7.4 billion external debt. Sri Lanka, $8.9 billion external debt to China. Bangladesh has $6.1 billion external debt to China. Other countries that accumulated billions of dollars of debt from China include Djibouti, Maldives and Laos. In Pakistan, China is building the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor worth $600 billion that connects Gwadar Port in Pakistan to Xinjiang in China. The project includes infrastructure activities including building roads, bridges, railways and ports. China continues to supply defense equipment, aircraft, frigates and submarines to Pakistan. In Sri Lanka, China signed a lucrative Hambantota port deal, bought the Sri Lankan port at 99-year lease. Besides that, China is building another port and there is a power station that is being built, container terminals that have been established, docking of Chinese ships and surveillance activities that threat India's sovereignty are a grave concern, and that is taking place in Sri Lankan waters. Bangladesh has also witnessed Chinese investment by way of building of bridges, power plants, railways and roads. China has provided defense supplies. It has built BNS Sheikh Hasina Naval Base south of Chittagong. There are 2 Chinese submarines that are already stationed in Bangladesh. There are frigates and corvettes that have been supplied to the Bangladeshi Navy. Bangladesh, in fact, is the first South Asian country to officially join the BRI. Let's start this conversation. On the telecast with me is Ambassador Manju Seth. And amidst the number of the amounts, billions and billions of dollars of amount that has been accumulated by all these countries in the subcontinent and in some of the African nations and the ASEAN nations, this is a debt trap diplomacy that has been successfully taken forward by China, especially in its quest to become a strategic and politically influential country across the globe, and its Belt and Road Initiative helps in gaining that status. But what these countries forget is in this debt trap that they fall because of higher interests that China seeks from them as compared to the World Bank or other international organizations. They are in perpetual vicious cycle and are then controlled by China and use their territories in whichever way China decides, and which is then strategically threatening to India, because these are countries that are the immediate neighbors of India.
Sort of engage and invest in all these countries under the BRI in India's neighborhood. And one of the main reasons is that these countries also want to develop and they are looking for investments. And China is ready to give it. It has deep pockets, as everybody says. So they are investing very vigorously in all these countries. And they are, as you very, very rightly said, gaining strategic and strategic heft by doing so. And plus, though their interest rates might be higher, they do not put in too many terms and conditions like the World Bank and IMF, etc. So that is a plus point for these countries, because they think at least we don't have to abide by all these conditions. They do not realize, however, that most of these projects, investments that are being made in their countries are not commercially viable, many of them. So how will they repay this debt back? They do not, I think, consider or do not want to consider. And that is one of the reasons they seem to be getting into the so-called debt trap with China. with China having the upper hand in all this, because when so much debt is owed to it, so much money is owed to it, naturally it can dictate terms, and it can make its writ sort of adhered to, and can decide how it wants each country to behave in its relationships with other countries, including with India in the neighborhood, and as you said, in Africa as well, very rightly, Africa also. So many countries in the global south are part of this BRI initiative, and it has given great dividends. It has paid dividends to China, and as it seeks to rebalance and rewrite the global structure and the global balance of power. And at the moment, we can see that as far as China is concerned, it has succeeded to a great extent in increasing its influence in all these countries, and which is to its advantage. But on the other hand, those countries who are affected, they have definitely not had the best, it's not very good for them. And I think from India's point of view also, it's not that we don't want development, but from our point of view, if it is going to affect our strategic and security interests, then there's a cause for concern for India. Megha.
Vijay Kranti, let's hear it from you. I specifically spoke about a handful of these countries, particularly the ones surrounding India, which is Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, and to some extent Nepal, and of course Pakistan. And Pakistan is the number one debtor of Pakistan, with about 67 billion US dollars of debt that it has accumulated up until now. The primary and the most serious cause of concern for India strategically is the CPEC that is being built from Gwadar port up until Xinjiang. In fact, there is military support that is being given to Pakistan. There are arms and ammunition that is also being provided along the line of control. There have been interception of these Chinese-made military equipment, Chinese-made arms and ammunition. There are aircrafts that are being built. There are submarines and frigates and corvettes that are also being provided to Pakistan, and not to mention the number of infrastructure projects and military bases on the port. On Gwadar port, that is of serious concern for us. Something similar that is taking place in Sri Lanka, but not at as strong a pace as it is taking place in Pakistan and Bangladesh as well. Nepal, we've already spoken about. Now, in a situation such as this, while we continue to ask countries in the subcontinent and on the global south to dissuade themselves from the debt trap diplomacy of China, is there much that can be done to protect ourselves in this circle that China has created of aggression that is going to be potentially difficult for India to fight?
You have answered a good part of the question yourself in explanation, but the other side is China. We have realized that China is using BRI in other countries to have its own military foothold, and also a byproduct was that it has increased its number of votes in all sensitive organizations of United Nations, whether it is WHO or the Human Rights Council, etc. Those are things which have international ramifications. But as far as India is concerned, BRI has created, you have mentioned quite a good number of examples. I will add to that in Nepal, it is extending the railway line which comes from mainland China to Tibet. It is extending to Nepal, which is going to be a very serious problem for India. From Pakistan's side, the main problem with the CPEC is that it is passing through the area which actually belong to India and is currently in the illegal occupation of Pakistan. So that causes a lot of concern, because whenever India thinks of, and this time in his speech, Foreign Minister Dr. Jaishankar has very specifically mentioned that the only issue to be settled with Pakistan is the return of POJK. That is surely the agenda, but unfortunately, now that China has CPAC in Pakistan through POJK, it is whenever it returns or India makes efforts, it will become not a bilateral or an issue between India and Pakistan. It will automatically include China because China has investments. So that is another serious development for us. And you have mentioned about, since India is being encircled by China using BRI, the other third example is Gwadar, as you mentioned. Gwadar is a very serious issue for India because of the Chinese presence in Gwadar and its location. The Indian Navy's supremacy in the Arabian Sea, which used to be a very dominant factor and very satisfying factor for India, that has been challenged. And in Bangladesh, where things are now taking shape, we don't know what is going to happen. It seems that things are going to be worse. But if China increases its foothold in Bangladesh by using either BRI or other ways, it's going to be another problem for India. But anyhow, we are now watching that China has created a situation which has been very nicely underlined by Foreign Minister's speech in the high-level segment of United Nations, the ongoing session, that India has a role to play now. And it's very interesting to note that today's India is a very different India of 2 decades ago. And whether it is encircling by China of India by using BRI or taking other steps, it's not going to be a walkover. China is surely going to get a bleeding nose. And with increasing, just concluding, and with increasing awareness, international awareness about China's games of using BRI to create problem for rest of world, now the conditions are not that favorable for China as it used to look 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay. Professor Madan Nalapat, again, a very, one mention that Jaishankar has said, our External Affairs Minister, he says, talking about when there is not a shared endeavor between the country who is acquiring debt and the country which is China that is taking control of the debtors' land in exchange for the funds that are being provided, is the exchange that is happening is to the detriment of the debt nation, which they do realize but can't do much about it. And India's neighborhood first policy that had been brought out in counter to China's BRI, have we been able to project the intent that we have in helping out our immediate neighborhood versus the debt trap that is laid by China? And do these countries understand the implications of joining hands with India versus taking steps to bring in China into their land?
Well, Megha, the world has changed a lot now, and you will see that industries are leaving China. Tech industries in particular are leaving China, and we just gathered, there were reports in the media about a Chinese nuclear submarine sinking before almost its commission. And that is a direct consequence of the technology denial regime that has been put in place by India, by United States, by Europe, by an increasing number of countries in a tightening manner. So China is going through its own problems. So far the BRI was concerned, it was conceived as a plan to exchange dollars into physical assets. The Chinese they understood the risk in the long run of holding dollars because they know they're in a hostile situation with the United States and other democracies. They were aware of it, and the democracies were not, frankly. But now, of course, all of us are aware of it. India was aware of it first, and the United States has followed. Europe is now following the lead of India and the US. So the fact is, they want to exchange those dollars for physical assets. And they take this on 99-year lease. But the fact of the matter is, Megha, this is a 99-year lease on a sovereign country. Now, if there is a security construct that can challenge the attempted domination of the PLA and of the PRC, then you'd by the stroke of a pen or perhaps a passing of a parliamentary law, all this debt can be written off by the country which is incurring that debt. So quite frankly, China depends on its military, as has correctly been said by Mr. Vijay Kranti, depends on its military, and its military is now finding itself overstretched, apart from the fact that it is losing ground in the technological warfare era. At that point, I would like to say Russia is much more advanced in tech than China, and I don't think the Russians will want to give up that advantage to China. So I don't believe they'll be in a great hurry to share the benefits of deep tech with the Chinese, at least unless they are prodded even more by the Western world, which I think may not happen because the Western countries are losing, frankly, they're losing public appetite for this Ukraine war with Russia. Now, therefore, I would like to say very clearly, this is a job opportunity for Chinese. You look at any BRI project, only Chinese companies. It's not like other projects where you can have multiple countries participating. Only one country participates, China. So basically, it's a way of using surplus capacity in China, surplus capacity in both construction equipment, other equipment. It is basically a relief to China at the expense of another country. And the last point I want to make, Megha, is that frankly, without India's blessing, none of these projects will get off the ground, at least in South Asia. Now look at Hambantota Port. Look at Hambantota Airport. Look at those. I mean, there's nothing. There's no activity.
Yeah.
There's no activity at all. And you look at Colombo Port. It's active because of Indian ships. If you take away Indian ships, then Colombo Port also becomes inactive. So quite frankly, throughout South Asia, they depend on India. And countries that are negative towards India, Pakistan, and now increasingly Bangladesh, although Bangladesh is now showing signs that it has understood the situation, they are going to suffer economically. You're seeing what's happening in Pakistan. It is going through an economic horrible depression. And the Chinese are not going to help. Chinese only help themselves. The Chinese Communist Party people, they only help themselves. So very frankly, I'm not very frightened by BRI, because the Chinese have got very little out of BRI in terms of profit. Yes, they've used their labor, they've used their surplus for production, but now what? Now where does that production surplus go to? They can't find any new markets, and their markets are shrinking rather than expanding. So frankly, Megha, I'm not an alarmist about BRI, and I think many of the countries that got into BRI are really suffering pretty horribly, and their people are becoming very negative towards China, but the elites and the government have been, in a way, captured by China. But how long that capture is going to last, we don't know. If the Quad, for example, develops into a full-fledged security alliance, if the India-US relationship develops in a manner that the Chinese lobbies in the US and India do not want it to develop, well, I think you're going to find that these countries are going to shake off China the way it did in the past. So many countries have shaken off debt through the use of sovereign power. And even the smallest country, even Maldives, they can shake away the Chinese debt with the flick of a pen. But they must know that there is an alternative waiting for them. And that alternative has got to be the Quad, India, the US, Australia, and Japan, which I've always been focusing on the security aspect of the Quad and on strengthening the Quad to ensure free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific, including free and open and inclusive Indo-Pacific countries that are now being threatened with domination by a predatory superpower. Thank you,
Okay.
Megha.
Okay. Rupinder Sachdev, again, we've spoken about the immediate neighborhood of India, but also let's talk about ASEAN, where a number of nations within the ASEAN grouping are complicit in their support and the benefits that they get from the BRI project, whether it is Thailand or we talk about Malaysia, we talk about Laos, which is also under considerable debt of China. And to be truth be told, that these countries are dependent on China, and they would rather prefer to have business and trade with China than to be associating themselves with India. I mean, to be very precise, you have trade that happens between China and all the ASEAN nations, which is much larger in quantity as compared and in terms of dollars as compared to India. So and is Quad really of any help in the Indian Ocean region, in the Indo-Pacific, when focus of the West is still continuously on Ukraine and then on Gaza?
Thank you so much. See, I mean, the countries in Asia, ASEAN, etc., I mean, they're factors, historical, cultural, China is their neighbor, just, overshadowing them. So they are doing a live and manage and adjusting game, right? The Quad, as it grows in its, context and depth, definitely will be a counter, because the Quad would also be, a network of supply chains and multiple technology transfers and such, so that which brings together infrastructure development also, and it won't be limited only to 4 countries, but will draw in branches like Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, of course, right? So it's looking to be an integrated framework which will definitely help counter China, I think, in the economic and therefore in the security and even technology domains. But stepping back, couple of points. Minister Jaishankar's statement at the UN, absolutely yes. I think the deep message was, as I think all our eminent colleagues have pointed out, he was mentioning that, okay, cross-border terrorism or terrorism is something which is obviously there, you should not be doing it, but the issue is the illegal occupied territory of India in Pakistan, by Pakistan. Now, thereby the message was not only for Pakistan, as also I think all of our colleagues have indicated, the message was equally for China. And that again, as we've been discussing, that pertains to the CPEC corridor which goes through Pakistan. That China, you're building a infrastructure project which is on our territory, and be it sometime, anytime in the future, the land will belong to India, you better watch out. That's one. But on the other hand, what Pakistan has done with this, again, I think our colleagues have mentioned, to my mind, by participating or helping to create the CPEC corridor, Pakistan in a way has created an insurance for itself. Okay, because yes, once again, now therefore, if India were to launch any operation, quote unquote, or any aspect with respect to POJK or Gilgit-Baltistan, it is Chinese presence there. So in a way, Pakistan has created an insurance for itself, apart from the debt and money parts of it. Now, the overall context in the global of the BRI, yes, certainly people are much more aware, that is, nations are much more aware compared to, let's say, maybe 10 years ago when the BRI project started. Much information is out there that how China manipulates the interest rates and the terms of the contracts, etc. So nations will be a little more wary. But once again, as again pointed out, the elite, the politicians, the businessmen of these countries, some of these countries, right, they are in for it for something for themselves for the short term. A politician who's a prime minister would want to see, a bridge constructed within his term or the next 2 years because he has promised to his electorate, right? So China plays that, plus as well as corruption, So for both objectives, the political short-term objectives, as well as, when there's a mega project coming, there is, money flowing in, and these decision makers, they get their, their part of the kitty. So that's what's out there on the BRI. Overall, I do think that China, what it is doing, see, in the long term, it's looking at a long game. These are investments, at least the infrastructure projects, right? And thereby, I think China is weaving a web. So that web, and it depends, at the perspective they're looking, I think they're looking long-term perspective. So that will continue to be out there. Another thing, Professor Nalapat was talking about surplus. Yes, sir. I mean, exactly. You know, the BRI was conceptualized. China had an overcapacity in construction, steel, cements, whatever, etc. So BRI was a neat and nifty way to use your surplus and go out and get these projects built up. So that has also been a factor. Now with the Chinese economy in a, in a decline, but though they've given a huge stimulus yesterday, by the way, huge stimulus, I think 2 days ago, which is supposed to, be a solid injection for the capital markets and resolving some of the economic issues. But still, China has its own economic problems too.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.